In a bustling town square, a confident man in a wheelchair stops to enjoy a simple lemonade, unaware that he's about to become the target of baseless harassment. But when Donald Trump steps in, the confrontation takes a shocking and unforgettable turn. The town square buzzed with life on a sunny afternoon, the kind of day where everything seemed to move at an easy, unhurried pace. Families wandered from stall to stall, savoring snacks from food carts. A musician strummed a guitar near the fountain, his tunes blending with the laughter of children chasing bubbles. Vendors called out their offerings, and the scent of roasted nuts and fresh lemonade filled the air. Amid the lively scene, Leon rolled his wheelchair across the cobblestone path. Dressed in a crisp blazer and jeans, he carried himself with a quiet confidence that seemed to match the calm yet vibrant energy of the square. He paused near a lemonade stand, the sun catching on the polished edges of his wheelchair as he reached for his wallet. As Leon handed over a few bills for his drink, Karen appeared. She was a middle-aged white woman with a neatly pressed blouse and an unmistakable air of entitlement. Her gaze swept the square critically, pausing as it landed on Leon. Her lips pursed, her brows knit together, and a muttered comment escaped her lips. Taking up space, she hissed, just loud enough for those nearby to hear. Leon didn't notice her at first, too focused on savoring the cool drink in his hand. But Karen wasn't one to let her annoyance simmer silently. With a dramatic adjustment of her bag strap, she marched toward him, her heels clicking sharply against the cobblestones. "Excuse me," Karen said, her voice carrying a pointed edge. Leon glanced up, his calm gaze meeting hers. "Yes?" he said evenly. Karen gestured vaguely toward the seating area near the fountain, where a few benches sat beneath the shade of a large oak tree. "Are you planning to park yourself here all day?" she demanded. "These spaces are for everyone, not well, you know." Leon tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "I'm just enjoying a lemonade," he replied, his tone steady. "Is there a problem?" Karen's face flushed slightly, but she pressed on, undeterred. "It's not personal," she said, her tone suggesting the opposite. "It's just people work hard to keep this square nice, and we can't have it being misused." "Misused?" Leon repeated, his voice calm but laced with incredulity. Karen nodded, folding her arms across her chest. "Yes, misused. These areas are meant for everyone, not for people just sitting around, taking up space. You understand, don't you?" Leon set his lemonade on the armrest of his wheelchair, leaning back slightly. "I think I understand perfectly," he said. The conversation might have ended there if Karen hadn't decided to raise her voice, as though making a scene would solidify her point. "It's just common courtesy," she declared, gesturing broadly to the small crowd beginning to take notice. "Everyone here pays to maintain this place. Some of us contribute more than others." The implication in her words was clear, and Leon's jaw tightened ever so slightly. He stayed silent, refusing to let her bait him into an argument. His restraint only seemed to infuriate Karen more. "Are you even listening to me?" she snapped, stepping closer. Nearby, a young couple exchanging ice cream cones paused, their curiosity piqued by the rising tension. A street performer stopped mid-song, his guitar hanging loosely from its strap as he watched. Phones began to appear, onlookers subtly recording the interaction. Leon took a slow breath, his voice calm as he finally spoke. "I don't want any trouble," he said. "I'm just here like everyone else, enjoying the day." Karen's face twisted into a sneer. "Trouble? You're the one making this difficult. People like you think you can just do whatever you want." The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. A woman holding a toddler on her hip shook her head, muttering. A man in a baseball cap whispered, "What's her problem?" Despite the whispers, Karen didn't falter. Emboldened by her own indignation, she pointed a finger at Leon. "You need to explain yourself," she demanded. "Why are you here? What are you even doing?" Leon raised an eyebrow, his calm demeanor unwavering. "I don't owe you an explanation," he said. His words were simple but carried the weight of quiet defiance. Karen's face reddened, her frustration boiling over. "See, this is exactly the attitude I'm talking about," she spat. "No respect, no consideration." By now the crowd had grown, forming a loose circle around the confrontation. Whispers turned into murmurs, and the tension in the square was palpable. A vendor behind a nearby cart shook his head, muttering, "She's way out of line." Leon adjusted his position in the wheelchair slightly, his calm exterior masking the irritation bubbling beneath the surface. "Maybe you should think about showing some respect yourself," he said, his voice steady. The crowd murmured in agreement. Karen glanced around, noticing for the first time that the onlookers weren't on her side. Her bravado faltered for a moment, but she quickly masked it with a loud huff. "Well," she said, raising her chin defiantly, "we'll see about that." The tension in the air felt thick and unrelenting. As the murmurs of the crowd grew louder, a figure emerged from the cafe across the square. Dressed sharply in a tailored suit, Donald Trump stepped into the sunlight, his gaze fixed on the scene unfolding before him. "Excuse me," Trump said, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "What's going on here?" All eyes turned toward him, the crowd parting slightly as he approached. Leon's expression remained composed, but Karen's face shifted from defiance to confusion. She had no idea that her confrontation was about to take an unexpected turn. The lively atmosphere of the town square had shifted. The once cheerful murmur of conversations and the melodies of street musicians were now drowned out by the sharp voice of Karen, her words cutting through the air like a knife. Leon remained composed in his wheelchair, his calm presence a stark contrast to Karen's escalating hostility. From across the square, Donald Trump emerged from a nearby cafe. Dressed in a tailored navy suit, his unmistakable figure drew glances as he stepped into the sunlight. He had been in town for a business luncheon, but his sharp instincts caught the commotion near the food carts. Trump paused, squinting toward the crowd that had begun to gather. He motioned to his security team. "Stay back," one of the guards urged, stepping forward. "We'll handle this." Trump shook his head firmly. "No. This needs my attention," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. With that, he strode purposefully toward the scene. As Trump approached, Karen's voice rose louder. She stood firmly in Leon's path, her arms crossed in defiance. "I said this isn't a place for charity cases," she spat, her words dripping with disdain. She pointed sharply at Leon's wheelchair, her mockery drawing murmurs of discomfort from the onlookers. Leon met her gaze, unflinching. "I'm not here for charity," he said evenly, his voice strong despite the rising tension. "I'm here because I belong, just like anyone else." Karen sneered, her confidence bolstered by the growing crowd. "If you don't want people to notice you, maybe don't roll into spaces where you clearly don't fit," she snapped, her tone cruel. Several bystanders gasped audibly, while others silently began recording on their phones. Trump's distinctive voice cut through the noise like a gavel in a courtroom. "What's going on here?" he asked, his tone firm, but not yet confrontational. All eyes turned to him as he stepped forward, his towering presence impossible to ignore. Karen spun around, her expression a mix of surprise and annoyance. Oblivious to Trump's identity, she planted her hands on her hips. "And who are you supposed to be?" she demanded, her voice tinged with irritation. Trump raised an eyebrow, his gaze calm but piercing. "Someone who doesn't like seeing this kind of behavior," he replied. "Why are you harassing this man?" Karen bristled, waving a dismissive hand at Leon. "He doesn't belong here, and I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking." Her voice dripped with condescension. "Don't try to turn this into a publicity stunt." Trump's jaw tightened, but he didn't rise to her bait. Instead, he turned his attention to Leon. "What's your side of this?" he asked, his voice carrying genuine concern. Leon hesitated for a moment, scanning the crowd. He could feel the weight of their stares, the pressure of their expectations. But as his gaze met Trump's, he saw something unexpected: an ally. "I was just enjoying the afternoon," Leon said, his voice steady but laced with frustration. "I bought a lemonade and was heading to the seating area. Then she came up to me, demanding to know why I was here. I didn't want trouble, but she wouldn't stop." Trump nodded, listening intently, his expression shifting from curiosity to quiet determination. "And you," he said, turning back to Karen, "why does this bother you so much?" Karen opened her mouth to reply, but her words faltered as she realized the crowd was no longer on her side. The murmurs had turned into quiet disapproval, and the lenses of dozens of smartphones were now pointed directly at her. "This is about respect," Trump said, his tone firm but measured. "And I don't see any coming from you." The tension in the square was thick. Karen's arms were crossed, her glare sharp as she tried to stand her ground. But Donald Trump, his towering presence commanding attention, was far from backing down. He turned to her, his voice sharp and unwavering. "Do you think this is acceptable behavior?" he demanded, his tone slicing through the murmurs of the crowd. Karen hesitated, thrown off by the directness of the question. "I'm just protecting the community," she stammered, her voice defensive. "We can't have people loitering around, making others uncomfortable." Trump raised an eyebrow, his expression stern. "Protecting the community," he repeated. "From what? A man buying lemonade, sitting in a public space? Tell me, Karen, what exactly are you protecting them from?" Karen flushed, her confidence faltering under his piercing gaze. "You don't understand," she began, but Trump cut her off, his voice rising slightly to emphasize his words. "What I understand," he said, pointing at Leon, "is that this man deserves the same respect as anyone else in this square. Respect isn't conditional. It's not something you give to some and deny to others. It's for everyone. That's what this country stands for." The crowd, which had been quietly watching, began to murmur in agreement. A few claps broke out, growing into a ripple of applause that echoed through the square. Karen bristled, her embarrassment turning into defensiveness. "You think it's that simple?" she snapped. "You think a speech solves everything? You don't understand the real issue here." Trump took a step closer, his gaze unyielding. "The real issue," he said firmly, "is this mindset, the idea that we can judge someone's worth or place based on appearances. That's not just wrong. It's un-American. And let me tell you something, America is stronger we stand together, not when we tear each other down." The crowd erupted into cheers, their applause drowning out Karen's attempt to respond. People shouted in support of Leon, their voices loud and clear. "You're right," someone called out. "Respect for everyone." Karen looked around, her confidence crumbling as she realized the crowd was against her. She faltered, her once defiant posture shrinking as the weight of public opinion pressed down on her. Trump turned back to Leon, his expression softening. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice quieter now. Leon nodded, a faint smile breaking through his calm demeanor. "I'm good," he said. "Thanks to you." The moment felt like a victory not just for Leon, but for the ideals of unity and respect that Trump had so powerfully defended. The crowd's cheers carried on, a resounding reminder of the strength that comes from standing together. Karen's frustration reached a breaking point. She crossed her arms, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and imsadery. "You're just playing the victim," she snapped at Leon, her words biting. "If you had any self-respect, you'd leave." Leon's expression didn't change, but the crowd grew restless. Before he could reply, Trump took a step forward, his tone firm but measured. "The only person playing the victim here is you," he said, his gaze locked on Karen. The crowd murmured in agreement, the tension in the square palpable. Leon turned to Karen, his voice steady, calm, and filled with quiet strength. "Your problem isn't with me," he said, meeting her glare without hesitation. "Your problem is with the idea that someone like me belongs here just as much as you do." Karen's face reddened, her confidence visibly wavering under the weight of his words. The crowd fell silent, drawn in by Leon's composed yet powerful demeanor. A middle-aged man in the crowd nodded, whispering, "He's right." Others began to murmur their agreement. Leon continued, his voice unwavering. "I'm not going anywhere because I have just as much right to this space as anyone else. It's not about my wheelchair or the color of my skin. It's about dignity, and that's something everyone deserves." The crowd broke into applause, their approval swelling like a wave. Karen glanced around, realizing that no one was on her side. Her earlier bravado now seemed hollow, her sharp words ineffective against the truth Leon had spoken. Trump stepped closer, commanding the moment. "Karen," he said sharply, "this ends now." He turned to a uniformed police officer who had arrived due to the growing commotion. "Officer, I want this documented," Trump instructed, his tone brooking no argument. "Make sure this doesn't happen again. People like her need to understand there are consequences." Karen's eyes darted toward the officer, panic flickering across her face. She muttered something incoherent and attempted to slip away, but the crowd wasn't letting her go unnoticed. Quiet jeers and pointed stares followed her retreat. As Karen disappeared into the distance, the crowd's energy shifted. There was no longer tension, only a shared sense of victory. Trump turned to Leon and offered a respectful nod. Well said, he told him. Leon smiled faintly, his confidence shining through. Sometimes, he replied, you just have to remind people that respect isn't optional. Trump approached Leon after the crowd began to disperse, his expression softer now. How about a coffee? He asked. I'd like to hear more about your story. Leon hesitated for a moment, then nodded, his calm demeanor unwavering. They found a small cafe just off the square. The air was filled with the scent of freshly brewed coffee and the hum of quiet chatter. Seated across from each other, Trump leaned forward, his voice thoughtful. Does this sort of thing happen often? Leon took a sip of his coffee before responding. More than you'd think, he said, his voice steady. People like Karen see the wheelchair in my skin, and they assume things. They think they can push me around. He paused, his gaze meeting Trump's. But I've learned not to let it define me. Moments like today remind me I'm not alone. Trump nodded slowly, his expression contemplative. I've seen division in many forms, he said, his tone serious. But moments like this remind me how important it is to stand up to speak out when something's wrong. Leon offered a faint smile. It's not easy, he admitted. But when people show up, like you did today, it makes a difference. It shows others that standing together can change things. Their conversation was interrupted as a young woman approached their table, her phone still in hand. I just wanted to say thank you, she said, looking at Leon. What you said back there, it really hit home. Another man, a middle-aged shopkeeper from the square, chimed in. I should have spoken up sooner. I'm sorry I didn't, but I'm glad you stayed strong. Leon acknowledged them with a nod, his gratitude evident. Thank you, he said simply. It's never too late to do the right thing. Trump turned to the growing group of onlookers, his voice firm yet encouraging. It's about respect, he said. For everyone, everywhere. That's what makes us strong. As the cafe's atmosphere grew warmer with unity and shared understanding, Leon felt a sense of hope rising. For all the challenges he faced, moments like this reminded him that kindness and solidarity still held power, and today they had won. The days following the incident saw a whirlwind of reactions. Videos capturing the confrontation spread like wildfire across social media. Hashtags such as Respect for Leon and Trump Against Hate trended globally, sparking heated discussions about prejudice and inclusion. The footage of Karen's behavior was met with overwhelming condemnation. Comments flooded in, with people calling out her entitlement and lack of respect. Karen's life quickly turned upside down. Her neighbors and local businesses distanced themselves, embarrassed by her actions. Community groups demanded accountability, and online platforms amplified the call for justice. Feeling the pressure, Karen released a public statement. Her apology, however, lacked sincerity, with phrases like "I didn't mean to offend anyone," only fueling more criticism. The response was clear: words without action weren't enough. For Leon, the event marked a turning point. Inspired by the support he received, he decided to channel his experience into advocacy. He partnered with local organizations, speaking at town halls and schools about the importance of accessibility and respect. His calm yet powerful voice resonated with many, shedding light on the struggles faced by individuals with disabilities. At one event, Leon said, "What happened to me wasn't unique. But the response showed me that people care, and that's what I want to build on, turning moments like these into movements for change." His words inspired others, encouraging volunteers to join his efforts. Meanwhile, Trump, moved by the incident, took action. He made a generous donation to a community fund aimed at improving accessibility in public spaces. In a statement, he said, "Respect isn't just a principle, it's a responsibility. Everyone deserves to feel welcome, no matter where they are." The town itself underwent significant changes. Officials announced new initiatives, including mandatory sensitivity training for employees and residents. Public spaces were audited to ensure they met accessibility standards, with funds allocated to make necessary improvements. The ripple effect extended beyond the town. News outlets highlighted the story, encouraging other communities to reflect on their inclusivity. Leon's advocacy efforts gained traction, and more towns began adopting similar policies. His strength and Trump's involvement had created a powerful momentum. In the end, the incident proved to be a lesson for everyone involved. From Karen's public reckoning to the town's transformation, it showed that even a moment of confrontation could lead to meaningful change. For Leon, It wasn't just about overcoming hate, it was about building a future rooted in respect and unity. Weeks after the incident in the town square, the community gathered for a special event at the local civic center. The evening air buzzed with excitement as people from all walks of life streamed into the brightly lit hall. Children tugged at their parents' hands, elders nodded greetings to familiar faces, and local vendors set up tables with refreshments. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation, not just for the speeches but for the sense of unity that had grown since that day. At the center of it all stood Donald Trump, his signature presence commanding attention. Dressed in a tailored blue suit and red tie, he exuded a mix of charisma and sincerity. By his side was Leon, seated in his wheelchair, a steady and calming presence. He wore his usual blazer and jeans, a subtle reminder of the quiet confidence that had diffused the situation weeks earlier. Trump stepped forward, the hum of conversations fading into an expectant silence. His voice rang clear through the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we're here for more than just words. We're here for change." The crowd erupted in applause, their energy a reflection of the shared determination to learn from the incident that had captured national attention. Trump paused, his eyes scanning the audience. What happened in our town wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a wake-up call. It reminded us that respect isn't a privilege, it's a right. And when someone's rights are questioned, when their dignity is attacked, we have to stand up. He gestured toward Leon, who gave him a small nod. Leon showed us something powerful that day. He showed us that true strength comes not from anger, but from composure, from staying firm in the face of hate and trusting in the power of justice. The crowd murmured in agreement, their admiration for Leon evident. Trump continued, his voice filled with conviction. "It's easy to look away when injustice happens, to say, 'It's not my fight.'" But Leon didn't look away. He stood his ground. And because of that, he inspired an entire community, no, an entire nation to reflect on what respect truly means. His words struck a chord. Some in the audience wiped away tears, while others nodded in agreement, their faces set with resolve. Leon's vision. As Trump stepped back, Leon wheeled himself forward. The room fell silent once more, the weight of his presence palpable. He adjusted his blazer, his calm demeanor steadying the crowd. "Thank you," he began, his voice soft but firm. "Thank you for standing with me that day, and for coming together tonight." Leon's gaze swept across the room, pausing briefly on a group of young children in the front row. "I hope that what happened serves as a reminder, not just of what went wrong, but of what we can do to make things right. This isn't about blame. It's about building a world where everyone is seen as an equal." The crowd leaned in, hanging on his every word. "I've faced moments in my life where people doubted me, doubted what I could do, who I could do. But I've also been blessed with people who believed in me, who reminded me that my worth isn't defined by others' opinions." He turned slightly, gesturing toward Trump. "That day in the square, I saw what it means to have someone step up, to say, 'This is wrong, and I won't stand for it.' That's what we need more of, not just from leaders, but from each of us." The applause came slowly at first, then grew to a wave of appreciation. Leon smiled, his humility shining through. "A hopeful note." Leon continued, his voice steady. "The world we want won't happen overnight. It'll take effort, conversations, actions, and sometimes uncomfortable truths. But every small step matters. Every act of kindness, every moment of courage, it all adds up." He leaned slightly forward in his wheelchair, addressing the audience with heartfelt sincerity. "If there's one thing I want you to take away, it's this. Never underestimate your ability to make a difference. Whether it's standing up for someone being wronged, teaching your kids the value of respect, or simply treating everyone you meet with dignity, it all counts." Trump stepped beside Leon, placing a supportive hand on his shoulder. "Leon's right," Trump said. "We all have a role to play, and when we come together, there's nothing we can't achieve." The event concluded with a sense of hope that was both profound and practical. Families left the hall discussing the changes they could make in their own lives. Local leaders committed to implementing the policies inspired by the incident. And Leon, his heart full, reflected on how far the community had come since that fateful day. As the crowd dispersed, the echoes of Trump's and Leon's words lingered, a call to action that would continue to inspire change long after the evening ended.